that's what sustainability is. It's making sure that you have a sustainable business that's supporting the environment that you're in, that you're, putting the right fertilizer or the right manure mix or whatever on the fields, taking care of the land so that you can pass it on to the next generation. And that piece of legacy, I think, is how we can talk more healthfully about sustainability.
Welcome to MeatsPad. In collaboration with the American Meat Science Association, it's a platform dedicated to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the global meat industry. On each episode, you'll have the opportunity to listen and learn from meat specialists and professionals about the whole meat industry. This podcast is brought to you by Ultrasource, equipment and supplies for the meat and food industry.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. It's your happy, hungry host, Phil Bass, back for yet an exciting episode. Folks, we have someone with us who is going to give us definitely a little bit of different take of what we normally have on the podcast. We're not going to dive super deep into super sciencey, nerdy stuff. We're going to talk about something that's even probably more relevant to all of the listeners out there. And so I'm going to welcome on Dr. Janet Helms, who is with McDonald's. I don't know if you've ever heard of that restaurant before, but Dr. Janet, welcome.
Hi, Phil. Thanks so much for having me today. I hope it's a wonderful day over by you.
Oh, it certainly is. It's a nice early winter weather here in North Idaho, and we're welcoming it. We welcome the precipitation. It's been kind of a drier year for sure, and so any of that is good. And it's that time of year for sure. And so for those listening at this time, it's or maybe at a later date, we're in early December, and so just kind of giving a little background. But Dr. Janet, I have a PhD. La-ti-da, right? Dr. Janet, you're a DVM.
Yeah.
And so, and interesting, before we got talking, we were just mentioning a little bit about some of your background and how it definitely relates to animal health and that in the past. But your current role with the McDonald's restaurant team is Senior Manager of Global Sustainable Food Strategy, Animal Health and Welfare. And that's a mouthful. But I want you to digest that a little bit for us. Tell us a little bit about what that means to the listeners.
So I do a lot of different things. So a company like the one I work for has external facing commitments. So I spend a lot of time delivering on global commitments. I recently did work on our chicken supply chain. We called it internally the broiler welfare commitments. We had made a number of commitments to try to improve the welfare of chickens within our supply. So I worked on that. We delivered on that at the end of last year, so 2024. I work with other commitments like antibiotic commitments, and then I'm also developing a long-term animal health and welfare strategy across species to make sure that we continue to add value to the supply chain, but that the animals are provided whatever we can to ensure that they're healthy.
Yeah, to maintain their health and their welfare. Obviously, it's in your
Yes.
title, and thank you for doing that. First off, well, you think about it from anybody in the meats world, and then trickling over into more the food service side, this whole idea of having an all-encompassing sustainability slash animal welfare, it's somewhat a relatively newer concept. I'm not going to say it's super new anymore, but compared to your general operations guy, this is definitely a newer area, but it's absolutely necessary, not only from making sure we're doing the right thing by the animals that are producing the food, but also helping tell the story to the consumers. And am I kind of digesting that, explaining that a little bit of how your role is incorporated into the team?
Well, I don't do a lot of external facing comms. I just proofread everything.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we need that too.
Yeah, I'm definitely not like the communications fabulous person, but I try. But I think making sure that we do the right thing for the animal as part of our culture and our history, is something that I've always focused on, professionally, but also here at McDonald's. So,
Mhm.
super excited to be able to add value to the lives of the animals within our supply chain. And, thinking more holistically also, perhaps from a regenerative ag position or
Mhm.
from a farm and farmer resiliency position, making sure that we are doing what we can to support the industry in a positive light.
Well, that's okay. That's really cool, and I like that angle. I want to come back to that a little bit, but you mentioned, you're in charge of animal health and welfare.
Yep.
You mentioned the chicken commitment, the broiler welfare project. Um, does your role extend beyond meat and into, say, dairy and eggs production?
Well, some of that is how we purchase products. So I
Okay.
work on the global side of the business, and some commodities are purchased locally. So
Hmm.
dairy and eggs are purchased more from a local perspective as
Hmm.
opposed to from a global perspective.
Okay.
So it's not like I don't do any work in dairy and in laying hens. I do
Hmm.
talk about them within the market and within our supply chain, but I don't. That's not my primary focus. My primary focus is more the globally purchased products.
Okay. Okay. So definitely more on the meat side of things then.
Yeah,
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 excellent. Well, that's good because this is MeatsPad, and so that's what we talk
yeah. We
about.
don't want to talk about eggs.
Well, I
Yeah,
was just curious. I was just curious. It all goes into the meal, right? And so,
that's right.
okay. Well, let's expand a little bit first off on, a part of your role is the sustainability side, and so tell us a little bit about what that means to you and the McDonald's team.
I think when I think about sustainability, as a veterinarian, I care about animal health and welfare. Because I care about animal health and welfare, I also care about the farm and the farmer.
Hmm.
I was in practice for about 10 years. So I know plenty of farmers. I needed to make sure when I was their veterinarian that they were profitable at the end of the day. That was one of my many roles, right?
Yeah.
I had to make sure that the cows were healthy. I mostly did dairy cattle practice.
Hmm.
I had to make sure that the cows were, breeding properly, that they had a good diet, that they were in good body condition, that they didn't have problems with disease or lameness.
Hmm.
So, that translates into a sustainable business over time, right? So I think I'd always had a focus on sustainability kind of before sustainability was a thing. I remember one of my clients, Harvey Boschma, and I were talking once, and he had asked me, "What is sustainability, Janet?" And I just looked at him and I said, Harvey, you want to be able to leave your farm to your kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, is what he said back. And I'm like, well, that's what sustainability is. It's making sure that you have a sustainable business that's supporting the environment that you're in, that you're, putting the right fertilizer or the right manure mix or whatever on the fields, taking care of the land so that you can pass it on to the next generation. And that piece of legacy, I think, is how we can talk more healthfully about sustainability. Because if you don't have a sustainable operation, you won't have that legacy to leave to your kids or your grandkids or your nieces or your nephews
Hmm.
in the future. So, I think that was one of the enlightening moments for me. That particular producer ended up moving to a different part of the state and building a brand new dairy. And, we had talked about how do we plan this dairy so that it can provide the best, income for the family, but also the best lives for the cows. So,
Yeah.
putting in free stalls and, thinking about the milking parlor or the milk center and how do we harvest that milk? How do we feed the cows? All of those things are kind of what we would have talked about at different times of the build of that dairy. So
Yeah.
it was fun.
Oh, wow. Well, and it correct me if I'm wrong, but my philosophy on sustainability, it's kind of like I've heard it a number of times. The tripartite pick to this is it needs to be environmentally sustainable. We need to be able to pass on the land, okay, and the business. It needs to be socially acceptable. And so whatever it is that we're doing, the customer needs to say, yeah, no, that's okay. But also that involves the welfare of the farmer as well. Like if they're not happy making a profit, they're either going to sell out or they're going to have to sell out, right? Like either way, it's not a sustainable business, which leads us into the fiscal sustainability. Are they making a profit? I remember Dr. Gary Smith, one of the most famous meat scientists living today, for those who are unaware, said at a meeting one time, agriculture without the benefit of profit is merely gardening. And we have to have that fiscal sustainability part as well. And you brought that in, which is really cool. Can you share a little bit about how you're taking your philosophy, say from your private practice side, and now applying it a little bit more to some of the folks you might be working with from that global standpoint of how we're maintaining a sustainable business model, and sustainable environmental impact and sustainable social acceptance, with the job that you're currently working with.
Well, I think of the veterinarian's oath. As a veterinarian, I'm very concerned with public health. I'm
Mhm.
concerned with the health of the planet. I'm concerned with the health and welfare of the animals that are under my care. So that One Health concept is certainly something that I take to heart. Um, and that's part of the veterinarian oath. And
Mhm.
that fits well into the work that I get to do with McDonald's because we do take a holistic strategy. We really do focus on being as holistic as possible. We've made climate commitments. I have to think about that climate commitment if I'm going to make a change in the supply chain. And I really don't have like you crazy powers within McDonald's. It's more setting policies and working with suppliers to try to implement things that work well for the supplier, that work well for the animals. So maybe an example is we require enrichments for the chickens in our in-scope supply. Enrichments are basically opportunities for chickens to express more of their natural behaviors.
Mhm.
So, is it sitting on a perch? Is it sitting on a platform? Is it dust bathing? Because chickens are
Mhm.
kind of like chinchillas, if you will. They like to, dig in the dirt and kind of use that as a way to clean and rest and relax, right? So
Mhm.
that's one of those primary behaviors they like. So making sure that we're providing those enrichments to allow the animal to do that. It's different for different animals. Chickens are a prey species, so what they need is going to be different than, your dog or your cat in your house. It's also going to be different than a dairy cow, um, uh, because they're just completely different animals with very different needs. So.
With an extensive range of equipment, parts, and industrial supplies, Ultrasource has been providing solutions to companies worldwide since 1883. Whether you're looking for kill floor equipment, vacuum packaging, or high-speed labeling, Ultrasource can custom tailor a solution to meet your specific goals and brand image. Choose Ultrasource for your food packaging and processing needs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, understanding the animal's quote unquote normal behavior is extremely important, and that's something. Interestingly enough, serendipitously enough, we're talking about that in my introductory animal science class right now. Right now, animal behavior, and especially these prey animals that we work with. I mean, they first off they feel happy and comfortable in groups, and that's important. But then also figuring out better ways of understanding their behavior so that we can provide those enhancements like you've mentioned, means of them expressing their again quote unquote normal behavior as normal as a domesticated animal can possibly be, because who knows what they would have done in the wild, I guess, in a different angle. But so okay, so that's great. So you've given me a little bit of an example. Maybe can you expand a little bit on what are some of the things that maybe, so you're looking at the meat industry as a whole, and maybe taking a few ideas here, also implementing things that you and your team believe are very important to bring about. What are some of the things that the meat industry is doing right now? We need to talk about all the benefits, I think, when it comes to sustainability, that maybe some of our listeners need to hear. What are some of the things? And you mentioned a great one, the enhancements, but tell us more.
Sure. So within our chicken supply chain, we're focusing on enrichments, as I mentioned,
Mhm.
for allowing the chicken to express natural behaviors. I would say on the beef side, a lot of people don't realize that beef cattle are out on the pasture for the bulk of their lives, right?
Yep.
I mean, a beef cow, a mama cow, really is on pasture her whole life
Yeah.
until she goes off to the packing plant for
Hmm.
slaughter. Her
Career change, we
calves,
call it. Yeah.
yeah, her job change. Her calves would typically be on pasture for what, 13 to 15 months, kind of
Hmm.
depending on where they live, where they were raised, and the availability of forage. And that's pretty incredible because that really is a holistic approach to things. If they're
Hmm.
being placed on in a place, or if they're on pasture in an area where they have access to lots of different kinds of forage, that ties us into the regenerative ag situation where we're enriching the soil with manure. You've hopefully have access to or available those little bugs
Hmm.
that like to ball up the manure and pull it into the soil so that it
Sure.
helps aerate the soil and augments fertilization or yeah, fertilization of the soil. You knew what I meant. I didn't say that
Yeah.
very smartly, but anyway. Um, and I had the privilege when I was in one of my previous roles to go out to North Dakota and see several regenerative ranches. For me, that was incredible to like really have those discussions, to work with NRCS. That's the right acronym.
Yeah, yeah, with USDA's. Yeah, yeah.
Work with it.
Natural Resources Conservation Service. It's a mouthful, but I only know that
Yes.
because I work with those guys with my own my wife and I and our private little farm. And so yeah, that's an awesome organization, and that's a cool call out. Thank you for mentioning them.
Yeah, and just having them like show you how like a nice piece of earth with a lot of different plants, how that captures more water than something that's just been plowed under. Like
Hmm.
it's amazing. And if we can get more and more farmers to appreciate the value of regenerative practices, which would look different in North Dakota versus Florida
Yes.
versus California,
Yep.
I think that that's a great thing. The work that like GRSB, so the um, global, I'm getting all my acronyms confused.
That's a lot of them. Yeah.
The the sustainable beef. So
Okay.
that one. They're doing a lot of different projects to try to encourage regenerative practices. A lot of different companies are working on regenerative practices, as is McDonald's. So helping with protecting the soil is
Hmm.
so important.
Yeah.
Cover crops in winter to protect the soil from erosion. That protects the streams from eutrophication.
Mhm.
Like it's all a big cascade. We don't want to
Yeah.
have all that topsoil way down in the Gulf of Mexico. We want it to stay in the fields in Nebraska or in the fields of Missouri. And that requires us to take different actions than we have potentially in the past. The Dust
Yeah.
Bowl was pretty tragic.
Hmm.
And we've learned from the Dust Bowl, but we need to continue to learn within agriculture. And the people that I work with are always continuing to learn. Our
Hmm.
suppliers are always looking at new and different practices and how can they integrate better things into their supply chains. They're typically continuously looking at driving improvements.
Hmm.
So you've heard of continuous improvement, I'm sure, Six
Hmm.
Sigma and all of that. We have several projects with our suppliers on a regular basis where we look critically at data and figure out how do we improve this supply chain.
Hmm.
So those would be some of the things that I see the industry doing well. I will also speak very highly of the flat iron. I love the flat iron steak. I just wish I
The
could get
steak, yeah. Okay, yeah. Is McDonald's making a flat iron sandwich now? Let's
No,
experiment in that
that's
area.
no. I wish. No, but since I live on the East Coast, getting tri-tip and flat iron is like much more difficult.
Sure.
But those
Yep.
are great cuts. And
Yep.
for me, a flat iron was, a great meal for like 3 to 4 guests. And then I
Yep.
would get a tri-tip for more guests, right?
Yep.
I had
Yep.
my cycle of meat that I would use
Yeah.
for my guests when I would cook. So I kind of miss uh, having my tri-tip and my flat irons that were so easily accessible on the West Coast that I don't have
Yeah.
here.
Regionality plays a huge role in meat cuts in general, and the McDonald's company is a great example of trying to focus on regionality yet maintaining consistency globally, and that's a weird balance to try to maintain. And we can have some other folks on in that product innovation category, but just to recap, like one of the big things that you just said is data-driven decisions, and that is so important for anybody in the sciences. We don't just haphazardly make a decision depending on the direction of the wind blowing that day. It has to be that it has to have some substance to it, right? And so you talked about regenerative agriculture, and this was a topic when I first started hearing it. I'm like, oh, how crunchy granola is this going to be? But in reality, there is so much to learn from this philosophy of regenerative agriculture. Okay, and for those who are less familiar with it, think about, cattle producers have been doing this for forever. Literally forever. If you've raised cattle, you've done this for forever. Where if you have animals on pasture and they're grazing the pasture, you are involved in regenerative agriculture. You are putting things back into the soil. You're improving the soil. The difference being more so with some of our more traditional, conventional monoculture type cropping. And it's not something we can go away from. We're humans, and this is built humanity. Potatoes are a great example. McDonald's goes through a lot of potatoes. We can't necessarily have wheatgrass growing through the potato crop, okay? But there's a lot to be said about maybe rotating that land in with some livestock over time, right?
Right.
Because of the magic, and I've said this so many times on this program, the magic of the ruminant animal, the cattle, the sheep, the goats, which McDonald's probably doesn't do a whole lot of lamb and goat meat, but these ruminant creatures are just magical in the way that how they can improve and impact the environment. But at the same time, we have our pig farms that are generating manure and slurry that we can now incorporate that into fields, and it's a great soil amendment. And so I'm assuming that's kind of where your counsel comes into how do we continue to make this business better for everybody.
Well, I have a colleague that spends a lot of time on both regenerative ag and farm and farmer resilience. So I I can't speak too in depth because I'm not working in that area any longer.
Uh-huh.
But I'm super proud of the work that he gets to do and that I work for a company that does care about farmer resilience, farm and
Mhm.
farmer resilience. And it really is connected well to regenerative agriculture and sustainability, right? So
Mhm.
they're very connected. It's that one health philosophy, the health of the people, the health of the animals, the health of the planet. I would typically put crops and trees in the planet part.
Mhm.
I guess if you're a crop person, you might think more about, well, crops are really important. Maybe they should be replacing the animals. It's really the planet piece. Wherever you put the
Yeah.
it could be crops and you can throw the animals on the planet. I don't care, but they
Mhm.
really are very connected systems. And I think the more we recognize that as a society, the more good we can do to waste less. If
Mhm.
you think about food waste is a big contributor to greenhouse gases.
Mhm.
Household waste, are we composting at home if we can? What are you doing with your grass clippings? Do you need to have a traditional white picket fence and a grass lawn? Maybe that's not appropriate anymore if there's not as much water available in your municipality.
Mhm.
I think,
Harder to do in southern Nevada and Arizona in some spots, right? So yeah,
yeah.
depending on where you're located, yeah, it might not be the ideal situation.
Yeah, so thinking about your personal choices, and I think that's where sustainability often kind of leaves the consumer in a position where it's not that easy to know what you can do
Mhm.
as a regular citizen to protect the planet. And
Mhm.
I think we in general can do a better job of providing those examples. So maybe it's composting, maybe it's doing
Mhm.
something different with your plastic waste. Um, you know, I, where I live, certain things can't be recycled.
Hmm.
Can I buy less of those things so that I don't have to contribute to the landfill where I live here?
Hmm.
Um, bulk buying, putting things into a jar so I don't have a plastic container,
Right.
et cetera. So how do we help people get there? And I think that's where the challenge is because a person that's just, living their life, maybe they're a school teacher, maybe they're a mechanic, they may not have the ability to do the type of work that you and I get to do with animals and crops and the planet. So how do
Hmm.
we help them? I think that's where sustainability kind of misses the boat in some ways because it's not that easy to recycle in all communities. My sister lives in Vermont and she has to haul her recycling herself
Hmm.
to the place where everything gets recycled. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
recycling,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and yeah, and definitely more rural communities are going to have a harder time achieving those goals if indeed that's a goal that folks are focusing on. And it's definitely a good objective for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and this leads me into kind of my second to last question for you is maybe expand a little bit about on your philosophy and theories of how other professionals in the meat value chain can play a role in advancing overall animal welfare for one reason. That's I mean that's a big topic for us in the meat sciences and animal sciences, but then sustainability as a whole. What are some of the things that we in the meat industry can continue to focus upon?
Sure. Well, maybe I didn't really define animal welfare. So let's define animal
Yeah.
welfare. So we're all kind of starting from the same place.
Yeah.
Animal welfare, from my perspective, is the physical and mental state of the animal as it relates to how well it's coping with its living conditions. So
Okay.
if the animal is coping well with its environment, coping well with the diet that it's consuming, that animal would have good welfare.
Hmm.
Um, and when I was talking about enrichments for the chickens before, that's really helping us address the five domains model. So we
Hmm.
want to provide a healthy diet. We want to provide food and water. We want to provide enrichments so the animals can express natural behaviors. And that's that fifth domain, which is allowing the animal to have mental well-being.
Hmm.
And making sure that we're doing those things. A lot of the big companies today are using the five domains model. We are. Tyson is using it. Cargill is using it. I had a list and I just don't remember all the companies that are focusing on the five
Sure.
domains. But making sure that
That's actually a great point to make, that there's that many that it's hard to keep track of them. A lot of good is happening in the world. So please continue.
yes, for sure. And I'm sorry I don't have a whole list
That's
because
good. That's
I
all
wouldn't
right.
remember it anyway. But then the other thing I think we do well within our supply chain is looking at outcomes. So
Yeah.
an outcome is kind of like, did you get an A or a B on your school test, right? It's the result of how an animal's care and its environment impact its welfare. So for dairy cows, that could be lameness. For chickens, that could be foot pad dermatitis and whether or not the animal has the opportunity to express that behavior of dust bathing.
Mhm.
Uh, for a horse, is the horse lame?
Mhm.
Is the horse getting enough exercise or is it confined to a very small paddock area?
Mhm.
Those are just some of the things to think about. And then measuring key welfare indicators, I think, is an opportunity within the industry. Maybe we're doing it on a small scale, but how do we benchmark? So my background was dairy cattle production medicine. I had tools like Dairy Comp and PC Dart and DHI Plus. There were others when I first
Mhm.
started practice, so I think I knew about five at one point. And I went to Minnesota and I never had to learn Dairy Champ because I moved to California and practiced out there. So there were a lot of dairy production tools when I was starting out in practice and benchmarking producers so they could see how other people were doing because you get blinded by your own space, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as the veterinarian, I was able to provide perspective. I could say, "Hey, your reproductive performance is lower than my other clients. Why is that? How do we
Mhm.
look into that?" And you have more abortions. Let's look critically at your vaccination program.
Mhm.
Let's do some BVD testing. Like, there's lots of stuff that we can do if we do that benchmarking that makes everybody better.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think of animal welfare as truly competitive because I think animal welfare should be kind of like the Meat Institute does it, like I'm going to share with you what I'm doing well
Open
from an,
source, 100%.
from an animal welfare
Yep. Hmm.
perspective because that's what's going to make the whole industry better. You think about the work that Dr. Grandin has done
Hmm.
with the Meat Institute, with the professional animal auditing certification organizations, with all the places she's been and the things she's done. She's more than happy to share her knowledge and her expertise and help us all get better. And
Yeah.
that's what I think we can do with key welfare indicators and benchmarking across the industry. I think about antibiotic use, I think about foot pad dermatitis for chickens, lameness in dairy cows. How
Mm.
do we do a better job of comparing, not to compare, and if I say be mean, it's to
Hmm.
compare and elevate.
Yes.
I want to teach all the kids in the school district how to read, not just one kid. I want everybody to flourish, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I think about. I don't know.
No, that's a great explanation, first off, of what the industry is doing well and how we can continue to improve. You keep coming back to data-driven outcome, performance, things that we can measure. And we need to continue to think about that. Think and sometimes it's very subjective. Do we have the enrichments? Yes, no. How is that changing the production of those animals? That's the quantitative measure that we can have. And another amazing animal welfare specialist, Dr. Lily Edwards Calloway, who also works hand in hand with Dr. Grandin at Colorado State. She's given me some really great examples of how enrichments and changing some of the ways that we do manage some of these animals that is counter to what we would think as efficient and effective is actually becoming even more effective. We know happy animals perform better. And that's across the board. And that's not just our food animals. I mean, happy dogs will be better companions. Happy horses will run faster races. They if they are content and we are meeting their needs, they are going to be optimized. And absolutely that applies to our food animals. I mean, the happy cow thing, that's a real thing when we're talking about milk production and health. And happy pigs are going to grow bigger. Happy chickens are going to perform better. All of that stuff. It really does make a difference. And when you can demonstrate that by making those measures, identifying the outcomes, and then also applying a fiscal benefit to all of that, that's a huge win. We
Chicken
win.
winner,
We
chicken
all
dinner.
win. We all win. Right? It's all a good thing. Oh my gosh. Well, I think that's a great area to kind of to wrap up as far as the main content here. But Dr. Janet, before I let anybody go, especially for their first time around, I want to know a little bit about your background. How did you get to becoming Dr. Janet Helms and now the senior manager of at McDonald's?
I think I'll just say I'm super lucky. I always wanted to be a veterinarian, so I managed to get into vet school and achieve that goal.
Mhm.
I went into dairy cattle practice in Southern California, God's country.
Mhm.
I didn't have to go pull calves in Nebraska in the winter. That was winner, Janet,
Definitely a
in
benefit.
that
Yeah.
regard. Um, and then I went into the pharmaceutical industry doing a
Mhm.
number of different roles from compliance, FDA reporting, adverse drug event complaint management. That was a great opportunity, honestly, to learn how to address problems.
Mhm.
And like, I think every experience I've had made me better at what I do today. I worked in corporate learning and development. So, I trained people in strategic thinking, in emotional intelligence, and strengths finder, and sales.
Mhm.
I did technical support. I was in sales for a period of time as well. Then I got into third-party animal welfare certification. So I had the opportunity to work on standards, look at audits and auditing, and understand the auditing industry, which honestly I didn't really understand. It was kind of before farm was really the FARM program, the Buy National Milk. Um,
Mm,
it was kind of before that program was well on its way like it is today.
mhm.
Today, I think 99% of all dairies are FARM certified.
Okay.
So had that experience, and then I got into supply chain after that. And I've been in supply chain now for almost 9 years, I think. And supply chain is a really interesting place because you can really drive change. And I think that's what I like about it the most.
Hmm. Hmm.
The broiler welfare commitments that I've been working on for McDonald's, and then our antibiotic commitments are great places to drive positive change that like I'm so proud of this work that I've done. And it's not just me. I just am the one that, got to finish the project, but lots of people before me set up the project. And, we have a project with FFAR, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. I didn't do that work that was already in place, and I just get to carry it to the end zone, right?
Hmm.
Or carried it to the end zone last year. So just lots of great people got me to this position, and I'm just really fortunate to be able to drive change. When I think about the impact that I'm able to have with this program and we're able to have, 2.5 billion chickens are reported in my key welfare indicator database on an annual
Wow.
basis now.
Wow.
Like, that's pretty darn cool. When I was in practice, I managed the lives of 34,000 milking cows,
Hmm.
double that to get the dry cows, and then double that again to get the calves. So
Hmm.
round it up to 120,000. I don't care. But I really am able to have a much broader impact. And it's all because I've accumulated knowledge and experience and opportunity, and working with great people, the WMIN group, the
Hmm.
women. Now, see, I can't do
Meat, yeah,
acronyms
that's
and
all right. It's a
translate
lot.
anything.
Women's Meat Industry
Meet
Network. Yes,
networking
an
group. Yes.
excellent partner of our program here. Yep.
Yep. The women's group is great. I've met a lot of people through that organization that have helped me, and I've hopefully given back enough too by being a mentor, and by participating in those meetings. So I think
Yeah.
having an open mind and being able to try different things has gotten me to where I am today.
Well, that's wonderful. And you absolutely have contributed back by just being on this podcast. We know that a number of folks who are part of the Women's Meat Industry Network listen to this podcast as well. And so, yeah, you are fulfilling your goals. And with that great CV that you just mentioned, you're clearly the right person for the task. You have the background, the understanding of animals. You've done a little bit of everything, it sounds like, including team building and almost a little bit of human resource development, which is, I mean, that truly is the full sustainability model, is bringing in the social aspect and not just the outward facing, but the inward facing, and understanding that we may have customers on the outside that we sell to, but we also have to sell to our own employees and our own team, the ideas, and making sure that they're happy and content, which will lead them to being high producing employees as well. And so, Dr. Janet, I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phil. You have a great day, and thanks to the audience for listening.
Of course, thank you.